What's up, everybody? Zach here, and this is another episode of What's Melting. Today, we're going to break down this Lucid Slugger bar from Northstar Glass. It's the first time I've actually used Lucid. I work with Carmeline a lot, and I've broken down quite a few Slugger bars, and I really enjoy working with these colors. They're very nice. Not everybody enjoys working the Slugger bars, so I figured it would be cool to share how I go about breaking them down and blowing them out and pulling down rod with them. So here I am just skimming a little bit of the cracked glass from when they break these apart. There's just a little bit of glass that'll boil very easily on the end there. And then I'll grab a prepped handle out of the kiln that I've gathered up to handle up to the end of that. What I'm looking for is a handle that will pretty much be as wide as the end of that Slugger bar there. It's around 1.5 inches thick, or maybe 1.25 inches, and handling up to it with anything smaller is prone to cracking off really easily. These colors are really, really workable. A lot of people are a little bit intimidated by them, but I've actually often rolled these in the flame by hand and gone straight from room temperature to sticking a handle on like this. But this time I just wanted, just to avoid any possible cracking, it is nice to throw them in the kiln. So I've got a couple pieces of glass on my kiln floor that I'll prop these up so I can minimize how much kiln dust I get on them, and then I start doing this process here. And as you can see, that big handle pretty much is about as big as the end of there. I didn't stick it on quite straight. It's a little bit frustrating. I definitely had to try and straighten it out a little bit against the L-marver there. I'm just brushing a little bit of the fiberglass from my tongs off of that. It stays pretty clean with those tongs, so it's not too bad. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing with the other end of this bar. I'm going to handle up with another gathered handle, so I need to skim a little bit of that trash glass away. And once that's done, that handle is kind of similar to what they call a moil in the hot shop, when they gather a bunch of glass so they can hang on to something. So, yeah, just gonna run over to the kiln, grab that prepped handle, and stick that once both pieces are nice and hot. This is a process that definitely, you want to get a lot of heat into the glass for each of these steps. If you try and stretch the glass when it's too cold, you get a lot of kind of lines and chords in the glass that they'll not want to stretch evenly. So the more heat you can get into the core of the Slugger bar when you pull them down or puff them out, the better. So right now, you can see I had that prepped handle attached, but I've moved on. Actually, I pulled some rod before I got to this step, but I'm going to do the blowout first in the video here. So I want to handle up so I can add that big blow tube with the flared end that I showed before we picked this up. It's sitting on the workbench below. So I'm going to stick that 10 mil rod on the end and try and make sure it's real straight. And then once it's attached nicely, I'll let it firm up a little bit and then start heating further down the bar to section off the part of the glass that I'll use for the blowout. So I'm going to heat until the glass starts to flex. I want to know that the center, the core, is fully starting to melt and is molten as well. And then I push it against the L-marver and I roll it until I have a bit of a line, just like you use a V-marver to kind of cut in. I use the edge of my L-marver to do that exact same thing. Helps me create a nice wide kind of trough in the edge of the bar, and it makes it a little quicker and easier to section off exactly how much glass you want to pull apart without stretching a long tail on the end of it that you have to condense back in if you want to do another blowout. So there we are, the last little constriction I do on there. Now I'm going to flame cut that apart. And then I'll be putting that piece down that I've sectioned off on the workbench briefly while I throw that big piece in the kiln. That thick handle that I've added to the other end often has a lot of stress. It's been out of the kiln for a little while since I started, so I want to pop it in there before anything cracks. You want to make sure those are worked in nicely, or else it's pretty easy to end up with some cracking. Every so often those fall off the end of the kiln in the hand, like they'll kind of pop off the handle in the kiln if you haven't done your job. And now I'm just going to heat this up until I can flatten it out a little bit and prepare to push a nice big hole all the way through the core of that piece. I've got my paddle in my hand and I'm going to start to flatten the end, and that'll help me collect the glass up and get it nice and wide for that big blow tube that I've prepped up. You definitely want to use a big blow tube on this sort of thing, because if you use a small end, it's very easy to blow the glass out too thin, and you won't have the glass to support the puff when you do your final blowout. I've seen some guys actually wrap a line of black. I'm not sure, any kind of black will do, I believe. They're usually quite stiff colors, and they can help kind of stop the heat running from the color you're trying to blow out into the handle that's holding it. But I find a big blow tube like that works quite well for me. So here I'm going to stick them together, and immediately after the stick, I'm going to pull a little bit. So this just helps to stretch that end a little bit before I start to work the heat into the rest of that massive glass. So yeah, just making sure you set heat into this, and I'll actually kind of peek into the side where the blow tube is and kind of try to judge if the inner core is glowing as much as the outer core or the outer glass. So I just do that. There I am peeking in, just trying to judge that glow. And the first puff that I'm going to do here is kind of just like a seed bubble. I'm just starting to stretch it a little bit. You won't see much expansion, but this is what it takes to kind of make sure that the next puff really blows out the rest of the glass evenly. I blow pretty hard on that first one just to make sure it's puffing out inside, and then go back into the heat and try and really get it glowing again. You want everything ready to move. Any unevenness to the heat base in the glass will stop things from stretching evenly, and that always ends up with uneven walls, which are hard to work back into being even. It'll take much more time. And as you can see, I'm getting a nice round bubble on the end of here. That's how you know you've done your job right. Everything's expanding evenly and you get a nice round bubble. Now I'm just going to get another angle on that and show you again, same thing. It's nice to get a couple different angles on the puff. So now I'm just going to start heating that up and stretching it down a little bit so it's more tubular, the size of what I usually use for a blank. So there you can see it turning a little bit more cylindrical. I puff it out, work a little more heat into it. This whole process really works the best if you have nice straight handles and you're keeping everything rotating evenly. And once it's all melted into an even kind of form, you can kind of start to stretch that blow tube end to the size you want. Right here I'm going to get it right about there and give it a little puff. just to even out the walls a little more, and then move down to the end of the tube and start to get that handle end a little bit worked in and evened out. There's often a little bit of heavier glass right where that handle is on the solid handle. It sometimes doesn't puff out quite all the way down to the very end. That glass will chill a little quicker than the rest of it, so it can start to stiffen up. Yeah, as you can see, that puff from another angle again. We're gonna get that end worked in now. So I heat it up a little bit, and then I give it a little bit of a stretch right before I flame cut that handle away. So there you can see that handle getting cut apart, cleaning up a little bit of the clear glass that's left on there. Yeah, just stretching that away and trying not to leave any boiled glass or any imperfections. Yeah, give it a little puff just to even it out, but it really had already puffed out almost all the way, so there wasn't much work to do here. You can see it expand a little bit. I'm going to condense it back in a little. I'll heat it, and then I'll use gravity to kind of let it droop and sag into the shape that I want. So yeah, just keeping that rotation going until I pull it out of the heat here, let it droop, give it a little puff. Then I'll I think I'm going to heat it up and then put it on the Elmarver just to straighten it out a little bit. But it was pretty good already. And there we go. That's a nice blowout of Lucid. I'm definitely excited to work this into some projects. I'm going to probably do a video of whatever I make with this, and once that's done, I'll link to this in the description. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it yet. I think we're going to pop that in the kiln and move on to doing a pull. So I'm going to make some rod. Yeah, you can see that big slugger bar sitting there. Now we're going to move on to that. Yeah, that's right before I put that second handle on. So we're kind of jumping back to the beginning. I did this first, but I wanted to share the blowout in the beginning anyways. So here we are, just getting that nice and hot, sticking that together. And once I get that handle worked in, I'm going to roll it against the Elmarver a little bit, try to work out any unevenness. That handle went a lot smoother than the first one. It's a little nicer. And having that nice and even is, once again, one of those things that helps you kind of pull everything out evenly. But when you're working a big, massive glass like this, it doesn't seem to be as important sometimes. A little bit of wobble in the handle is less of a problem than with a lot of other processes. You just need to make sure you get a lot of heat into the rod. So I move my torch down the rod a little bit, or the slugger bar, and I actually get my third stage on the grand going to put a lot of heat in here. And you're just going to roll for a while. I think this took me about 15 minutes as well. The blowout took me 15 too. So there, if you do this quickly, or if you work efficiently, you can get this done fairly quickly. A lot of guys just want rods made for them. Some of these colors, they don't work that way. Something about the kilns that Northstars using would overstrike, I think, the gold in some of the colors, and you'd lose a lot of the effect of these semi-transparent colors like Carmeline and Stargazer and stuff like that. But that's beyond me. I don't know how all that stuff works, and I'm not 100% sure what those furnaces look like. And I know these colors aren't always available. They definitely batch them out intermittently. So if you're looking for any of these colors that I share as sluggers, oh, here we go with the pull. I got all that heat set in there, and I started the stretch, and now I'm going to kind of pause and wait for that glow to really leave the middle before I really give it some more stretch. Like, once that glow goes away from the center, I really give it a strong pull, and then it kind of sets up at that thickness and lets you continue to pull that rod down to that size. Then I flame cut that into 2 pieces because it's a little long to manage. And then I'll grab my tongs and melt that last piece off of the slugger bar so I can throw that back in the kiln. And that's the job done. Hope you guys enjoyed. I really like making stuff with these slugger bars. I'm looking forward to doing a few videos with the prep that I made in this, and I'll link to those for sure, and like show you guys what I'm doing with this stuff. It's a fun color to work. Hope you guys learned something. Take care.